Miq, ne jemi zhvendosur në këtë ambient, kemi të ftuar për një intervistë Cristina Olariu. Është gazetare dhe menaxhere e Radio Voice of the Gospel në Timișoara të Rumanisë. Thirrja e saj kryesore është përhapja e Ungjillit dhe ndarja e vlerave të krishtera të bazuara në Bibël përmes radios, televizionit dhe platformave online. Jemi shumë të lumtur të të kemi këtu në këtë intervistë.
Thank you.
Faleminderit që jeni këtu. Si po të duket Shqipëria në kaq pak orë qëndrimi? Ke dëgjuar më përpara për vendin tonë?
Oh, of course I've heard. We are connected. You even don't know since I heard about Albania, since Albania was an atheist country and you didn't have any church. And I grew up praying for two things, Albania and Oltenia. This is a south part of Romania with very few Christian presence. But I started with a church who prayed for Albania.
Keni shumë vite eksperiencë si gazetare, si ka nisur rrugtimi juaj në gazetari?
Well, I never dreamt to be a journalist. Some people watch TV or look at journalists and want to be in front of others. I never dreamed. I never wanted. But by accident, I saw an announcement that Radio Voice of the Gospel search for volunteers to involve. And it sounds interesting and challenging, and I accepted the challenge. I went to the interview. They picked me to produce a youth program. At the time I was young. And each program confirmed me that this is a calling. I can share a message. It's not only being in front of people, it's something deeper.
E çfarë do thot për ty të jesh një zë I Ungjillit përmes medias?
Well, this was the key that made me start working in media. I realized that I can share the gospel very easily. You see, when you talk to people about Christ, they might be not interested or feel offended or feel that you are intrusive. But when you are on radio or television, people are free to listen without feeling that somebody is intrusive to them. They can close the TV or the radio whenever they want. So this freedom of choice made them listen to what you're saying, and it's easy and strong at the same time.
A mund të na tregosh pak për vizionin dhe historinë e Radio Voice of the Gospel në Timișoara?
Well, our mission is to bring the gospel and share the Christian values, because we assume Romania now is a Christian country, so we called, of course, most of them are only by name Christians, they don't practice their faith. But our mission is to share what really means to be a Christian, what are our values, how to share the scripture, and how to influence people in order to live as Christians.
Cilat kanë qenë disa nga projektet ndoshta ose programet më të ndjekura që kanë pasur impakt tek dëgjuesit përmes kësaj radio?
Well, when we talk about programs, the most impactful are the stories, testimonies, stories of life, people who come and share their lives and how God impacted them and amazing experience that I always thrilled to listen to. For instance, I remember a story of a man he's a pastor, and he told us about his son who didn't want to give his life to Jesus, but their family prayed really hard for him. And he went in a Christian camp, and it was the moment when he was born again, and he realized that God really exists and gave his life completely to God. And he wanted from that moment on to be an assumed Christian. 3 days later, he died in a motorcycle accident. And all the family went to the hospital because he didn't die on the road, went to the hospital, prayed for him, and he died. And after he died, his father went to the person who provoked the accident, the man with the car, and said, I want to say that I really forgive you. I'm not upset on you. I realized that all our days are written in God's book. And it was the moment when my son had to go to God, and it was prepared for this moment. And don't feel in any way guilty, and they pray together, and it was such a powerful story. A lot of listeners were touched by this story, and you see, these kind of stories make you think, who am I? Why am I living here? What if something like this happened to me? Would I be able to forgive the person who provoked such a pain to me?
Do të kaloj tani tek një pyetje tjetër, sa e rëndësishme është bashkëpunimi ndërmjet mediave të krishtera në vende të ndryshme të Europës, si mendon?
I think it's important Christians to work together. You see, 1 + 1 in mathematics is 2, but in scripture, 1 believer with 2 believers make more impact. It's much more impact. And when we as Christian media come together and put our resources, our experiences, our prayers, we become stronger. We really become a voice. As I told today in our seminar, in this part of Eastern Europe, we don't have a history of Christian media. We had to learn, and it wasn't very easily. Now, we as Balkans, when we come together, we have a history, we have something that connects us. And I think we will be much stronger when we share resources and encourage each other.
Cristina, si mendon, çfarë mendoni se I duhet më shumë medias së krishterë në Ballkan sot?
We need to grow. We need to understand how the world is moving and to adapt. Sometimes we are too conservative, sometimes we don't understand how to make changes, and we are scared about all these changes. You know, there is an interesting example about Kodak. Kodak was one of the best film and photography companies, and during about 70s, they discovered a digital camera, but they were so afraid to use it because they thought that they will lose their business. They produced film and said, printing photos, and said, let's hide this discovery. And somebody else came with the discovery. And of course, all the photography exploded. They couldn't stop the technology and the progress, but they were afraid of it, and they didn't adapt at the right time, and they lost everything. So we as Christian media, we need to learn how the things are moving, what to do next, because the context is so changing. We have war in Ukraine, you have inflation and economic hard difficulties here. We need to understand what is happening around us and to respond and be ready to adapt to what is happening.
Ke një histori frymëzuese nga puna juaj në radio ose në televizion që ti do të dëshiroje ta ndaje me ne?
Wow, there are a lot, and I don't know which one could help you. One of the most interesting, and I think this is what we are fighting now, is relating to the building that we are located now as radio. For years, we work in a very small apartment, and a lot of good programs and projects and social projects we developed there, but it was too small for what we were doing. And we started to pray for a new building. And we prayed, and we encouraged our listeners to pray with us. And we said, let's run 40 days of pray and fast for a new building. For 5 years, nothing happened. We went, we saw a lot of buildings. Nothing really was appropriate for our radio. And after 5 years, a businessman found a building, and it was exactly what we needed, and he bought it. And he allowed us to stay 5 years for free there. And he said, if you want to buy it in 5 years, we can discuss. And it was so interesting because it was a challenge. You pray, and nothing happens. And this is discouraging, and you wonder and ask yourself, is anything wrong with me? Is something that I'm not doing well because you are not doing? I'm doing my part, but you don't work. But God proved that He is faithful, and He can do impossible whenever He wants to do it, and we need to trust Him.
Lavdi Jezusit, ai gjithmonë ka kohën e tij dhe ai nuk është kurrë me vonesë, është gjithmonë në kohë. Pyetja radhës, a keni një mesazh për brezin e ri që dëshiron ta përdor median për lavdinë e Perëndisë?
I really love to hear that young generation wants to use media for the glory of God, because they use a lot media, social media. They are really good in posting and even consuming a lot of content. And when you decide to use it for God's glory, God will give you opportunity. You can be a missioner on social media. You can, through your posts and the way you are comment, to influence a lot of people. So I encourage them to use it at most with excellence in the best way, and to learn to go to study journalism and use all the tools that we have, because now is the time when we can influence millions of people.
Cila është lutja juaj që keni në zemër për vendin tënd, për kombin tënd, Rumaninë, pse jo dhe për Shqipërinë?
I pray for the church to be strong. Of course, not the whole country will turn to God. We understand this, but the church needs to be strong, should be united. And if there is something that I saw in Romania, I don't know if in Albania is the same, is at least last year the church was so divided. And when the church is divided, the enemy wins. So I pray for the church to be strong and relevant and understand the right time that we live in, and be exactly what we need to be for a time like this.
Të falenderoj për këtë intervistë dhe shumë bekime në punën tënde.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Miq, ishim me Cristina Olariu, gazetare nga Rumania.